I am dressed up as a bee slash Steve Jobs. So yeah, today we have a very special meal. I'm actually trying the new broccoli and cheddar mac and cheese from Panera, and it gets better. They put it in a bread bowl. I'm sorry, nothing could be better. Okay, so today I'm basically going to be discussing a horror story that happened in my town years ago before I ever lived there. It's a really good story to tell on Halloween because it's like spooky. It's also like really scary. I might get scared as I'm telling it, but it's okay because it's fitting for the holiday season. Okay, I need to dig into this right now before I go crazy. Okay, so I got the broccoli cheddar mac and cheese in a bread bowl, a side baguette, HEHE, a chocolate chip cookie because their chocolate chip cookies are so good. Their Greek salad because again, love their Greek salad, and a side of chips. Okay, let's dig in. Oh my goodness. Okay, ready? Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh my god. This is so good. Oh my god. I know that we have like a huge bread bowl, but let's dip some bread in. Normally that's always how I eat my Panera mac and cheese, or mac and cheese in general. I always get like a side of bread and I dip it in. Oh my god. I am so happy. So, this is the story of John List. This man, John List, was always very religious. He meets a woman after college named Helen. They start dating for a while. All of a sudden, Helen tells John List that she's pregnant. John List, being a devout Christian and a devout Lutheran, decides to marry her because it's like a sin to not. After they get married, Helen tells John that there is actually no baby and she lied. John obviously like isn't gonna divorce her or anything because like that's against his religion, so he just decides to, you know, keep going with the marriage. But they ended up having 3 kids in the span of 4 years. Patricia is the oldest. The middle one is named Fred, I'm pretty sure, and then the last one is John Jr. And John Jr. was always known as like John Sr.'s favorite kid. They're looking for houses, John's looking for a job, and he ends up getting a job as vice president of a bank. He's making pretty good money from this job. Obviously, it's like being vice president of a bank, you know, you make good money. His wife, Helen, sees this 19-room mansion located in Westfield. It's on like the street called Hillside. Hey guys, I just wanted to say, each time I say Westfield, I mean Westfield, New Jersey. I don't think I said that once or said that Westfield was in New Jersey. But yes, this all happened in Westfield, New Jersey, where I grew up, okay? She's like, John, I really want to buy this house. Like, can we please buy it? And he, not having enough money to put down like a deposit for the house, he talks to his mom, who he's really close with, and she ends up giving him a loan for the house in exchange for her being able to live in the house. They buy this 19-room house, and it's called Breeze Knolls. That's the name of the mansion. And literally less than a year of buying the house, John List loses his job as vice president of the bank, mainly due to a lot of complaints about his personality, because John List was a man who was very socially awkward. Everybody said that he just rubbed them the wrong way. Because of that, he couldn't really hold a job because of his awkward personality. So when he got fired, he would lie to his family, told them he was going to work every day, but he really would just be going to the train station, taking random trains back and forth, and then going home at the end of the day, and his family all thought he had a job. But he didn't. He ended up getting another low-paying job, but then he actually lost it, and then he got another low-paying job and lost that because of the same thing, personality issues. He couldn't hold a job. He had this huge mansion to uphold. It wasn't working out. The best part about like a bread bowl is getting all the soggy bread at the end of it. I always like take apart the bread because the bread obviously has all this cheese on it. It's just like a very messy meal, but Panera's sourdough bread is so good. So yeah, John List can't keep a job. He has a family to support. He's stressed. Not only is he stressed about the finances, he's stressed about a lot of other different things. For example, him being a devout Christian, he wants to impose his beliefs on his children and his wife, and he kind of wants them to hold the same beliefs, but they don't really. Sometimes often happens with parents that are like really, really religious and try to impose their religion on their kids. Like, you're just gonna drive them away, you know? John expressed a lot of concern over his daughter, Patricia. He thought that she was succumbing to the culture of the 1970s. Apparently there was talk about her like trying marijuana, and also she wanted to be an actress when she grew up, and she told that to John, and he thought that the like profession of acting was like a sinful job. So he already thought his daughter was diverting away from God, diverting away from the Christian religion, and he was not happy about it. His wife had a similar issue, except hers it was a little different. His wife Helen was married before she married him, and she actually contracted syphilis from her ex-husband and never told John. So she never really did anything about her syphilis, and while they were living in the house, it had advanced to a point where like her vision started going away, and she actually got a mental illness from the like advanced syphilis. And as a result of that, she stopped going to church. She became an alcoholic, and John was worried because he's like, oh no, like these are all things that aren't compatible with my values in the Christian religion. Like she doesn't want to go to church anymore, and he was just very stressed out. Okay, the Greek salad from Panera is really good. Like it's so simple yet so good. So he felt like his kids were diverting away from God, and also he didn't have a job and he didn't have any money to support their lifestyle. Apparently in the Lutheran religion, it's seen as a sin to be poor. It's seen as a sin, it's seen as an embarrassment. You're just, as a Lutheran, you're not supposed to be poor, apparently. That's what he thought. Me? I think that's the dumbest shit in the world. But hey, all you Lutherans out there, tell me if I'm wrong, but he thought, oh, what better way of ridding my family from the embarrassment of being poor than killing them? He literally thought that killing his family would be the best way to fix this issue. And also he was worried that they were going to go to hell, so he's like, oh, why don't I just kill them now so they can go to heaven before like demonizing themselves and going to hell. He's kind of a religious fanatic. Like people knew him as a religious fanatic. He decides to murder his whole family. So one day, John List kisses his kids goodbye to go to school. Once his kids are out the door for school, he goes into the kitchen, shoots his wife. His mother, who was living in the house, was like, John, like, what's that noise? He goes upstairs to where his mom was staying, shoots her in the head as well. His daughter, Patricia, comes home from school. He shoots her. His youngest son comes home from school next. He shoots him as well. His favorite son, John Jr., actually had a soccer game that day, and he actually like went to watch his soccer game, and then when he was driving his kid back, John Jr. went into the house and he shot John Jr. just like all the rest. He always shot them from the back of the head. John Jr. actually was the first one of his family members to struggle, so he shot him like 9 times in the head until he died. He's so messed up, dude. He lines all of the family members up in what they call the ballroom in their house. He left his mother in her room upstairs because apparently she was like too like fat to carry downstairs. He literally like in his note before he left, he's like, mother is upstairs, too big to carry. I'm like, what an asshole. Like, you just killed your mom and you're calling her fat? Like, the audacity. After John List lines up all of his family members, except for his mom because she's too big to carry, he writes a 5-page letter to his pastor explaining what he did and why he did it. He also calls all of his kids' schools, tells them they need to go take care of a sick family member in like North Carolina and that they won't be at school for a really long time. He stops all their mail. He stops all the newspapers coming to their house, says that they're going to be out of the house for a long time. After he leaves the house, he goes, takes out the rest of his mom's savings, and then drives to JFK and then takes a train to Denver, Colorado. John meets his new wife in Denver, Colorado, and they end up moving to Richmond, Virginia, which is not too far from where I reside right now. It could be, I don't know. But he's in Richmond, Virginia with his new wife, having a jolly old time. Well, I mean, he didn't like meet his wife right away, but after he moved out, it took a really long time for people to realize that nobody was in the house because they kind of kept to themselves as it is, so nobody really suspected anything. except for Patricia, the daughter's drama teacher. Patricia would go to school all the time and told her drama teacher, she would tell him that she was so afraid for her life. She was afraid of her father. She was actually afraid that her dad would like murder her and the whole family. She told him that. So after they were missing for a while, he was really concerned. He convinced another teacher to go with him to check out the house. They get to the house, all the lights are on. They're like peering through the windows trying to see if anyone's there. One of the neighbors sees them looking like in the windows and stuff, and they got nervous, so they called the cops. The cops came and the two teachers were like, you need to look inside this house, like something is up. The cops end up going in the house. It's locked, but they end up like breaking through a window. And all of a sudden they just hear this like classical music playing throughout the house. It's kind of like a funeral vibe. John List had literally, before he left, turned on all the lights and played this like weird funeral music in the background. Like how? Oh my God. Imagine being like a cop walking into that. I could not, like, I would not be okay. Like, that's so freaky. All the lights were on, funeral music was playing in the background, and the cops were like, oh fuck, there is a decomposing smell or some really bad smell going on in this house, and alas, they go into the ballroom and see all the bodies. The cops were like, all right, something happened here. They find his like 5-page letter to the pastor, and they're like, oh, this man just killed his whole family. Like, that's what happened. This man is crazy. We need to go find him. They try to track him down. They find his car at JFK, but there was no record of him ever taking a flight because he took the train, and they had no other leads after that. Fast forward, it's 1989. A new show, America's Most Wanted, comes on the air for the first time. They're trying to find other cases to put on the show, and the Union County prosecutor is like, hey, it's been a really long time since this case happened, I think 18 years. We should put this case here because the killer has still not been caught. The head of the show is like, no, this is too old of a case, it won't be good, so he turned them down. The host of the show heard about the case, he heard about John List. The host felt like a special connection to the case because his son died when he was 6 years old. I guess like the thought of like, you know, this man killing his whole family really bothered him. So he was like, no, we are taking on this case immediately. Like I want to cover this case. So they're like, okay, we'll cover it. I'm sure it wasn't like that easy, but they decided to cover it. So before like they like put the case on the show and everything, they needed to get a current picture of John List of how he looked in the present day. At this time, he was in his 60s, so they needed a current picture of him, which they didn't have. They had like a younger picture of him, and they brought it to like a forensic scientist who did a lot of like face recognition and stuff like that. The forensic scientist like looked at pictures of his parents, of John List's parents, to like see how they aged and like compared it to John List, and they actually came up with a really accurate depiction of what he looked like at that age. So once they had this picture, they're like, okay, we're ready to put him on the show. Like, we're ready to see if anybody sees him or anything like that. So they put it on the show, and all of a sudden, a woman in Denver, Colorado, realizes that it looks a lot like her former neighbor, John List, or as he called himself at the time, Robert Clark. He had like a new social security card under the name Robert Clark, so that's, you know, the name he was going under. So she's like, oh my God, this guy looks so familiar. Like, he literally looks like her old neighbor, who's now living in Richmond, Virginia with his new wife. She calls in a tip and tells America's Most Wanted about it. And she's like, hey, think of this guy, he's my former neighbor, I know who he is, like, I think he's the guy. So the FBI ends up showing up at Robert Clark's house in Richmond, Virginia. His new wife answers the door and she's like, oh, he's not here. So they go to his work, where he's now working as an accountant in Richmond, Virginia. Shocked he hasn't gotten fired yet, but he's working as an accountant. And they go to him and they're like, oh, are you Robert Clark? And he's like, yes. And they're like, are you John List? And he's like, no. And they ask him multiple times if he's John List. He denies it all the way through the FBI finding his fingerprints back when he was John List. He had prints taken when he wanted to get a handgun, and his prints matched the handgun prints back then. So they're like, all right, you're a John List. They put John List on trial for 5 counts of first-degree murder, and the penalty for that is like life in prison. Seriously, I'm so mad. Like, I wish I got tomato soup to also put in the bread, because I ate that mac and cheese so fast. It's okay. I'll probably just save the bread. Actually, yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll save the bread and get tomato soup. Goes back to Panera twice in the same day. Okay, yeah. John List is on trial. The jury finds him guilty for all 5 counts of first-degree murder. John List's defense, he tried to plead insanity, tried to say that he had PTSD because when he served in World War II, they denied it. They're like, no, you're a crazy man. It's not PTSD. John List tries to appeal it. It gets denied and he spends his whole life in prison, and he dies in like 2008 from pneumonia or something. Oh, I actually forgot to say this. In 1972, like a year after the murder happened, arsonists burned down the house, and apparently there was some like Tiffany stained glass skylight that apparently at the time was worth $100,000 when now it would be worth like $700,000. And apparently had the Lists known that, it could have solved all their debt and like the kids would probably still be alive, honestly. But yeah, that I thought was like really creepy, that like could have solved all their issues and they just didn't know it was in the house. It is really sad because I feel so bad for these kids had such a horrible, I mean, horrible doesn't even begin to explain it. Like, they had such a horrible dad. And you know, there are a lot of theories that say like, oh, like a lot of people describe John List as being very socially awkward. He didn't know how to interact with people. He had really bad he actually was diagnosed with OCD and they thought he was autistic. But to be honest with you, like there are so many autistic people that don't murder their whole families. I think he's a complete narcissist because the reason why he killed his whole family and not himself, he was like, oh, well, he's like, my family's gonna go to heaven if I kill myself, because suicide and like the Christian religion is like known as like one of the greatest sins, unforgivable sin. And he's like, oh, if I kill myself, I'll go to hell and I won't be able to be reunited with my family again. Like, bitch, you just killed your whole family. They do not want to be reunited with you at all, okay? Get over yourself. You literally just killed them all. You think that you're gonna get to heaven, they're gonna be like, oh my god, Dad, we missed you. No. If that was my dad and he was like, hey kids, like in heaven, I'd be like, get the fuck away from me. I'm here because of you, bitch. Like, the fuck? And the reason why I've always been I've known about this story for years. It's because one of my really good friends growing up, her house was right next to where the List house used to be. And when we were like in elementary school, she'd be like, oh, do you know what happened there? And I thought it was the scariest story ever. Like, it haunts me till this day. I still think it's so scary. Any story about a crazy religious man going crazy and murdering his whole family scares me to no end. So I've kind of always known about this story, and it happened in my town. Westfield is like this tiny ass little town that like literally nobody knows about, but because of this story, a lot of people know about it. And not just the story about John List. I'm sure you've all heard about The Watcher. There was literally a movie made after it. That also is based in Westfield. That's probably going to be a story for another day. Speaking of movies, the story of John List was actually referenced in a lot of different movies. Like The Stepfather with Penn Badgley, that was after John List. I've never had a banana pepper. Why are they so spicy? Wow, that was shocking. I've never had a banana pepper in my life. But yeah, The Stepfather with Penn Badgley. Basically, it's this movie about, it doesn't really sound a lot like John List, honestly. I don't know. I saw that it was based off of him, but it's kind of a different story. Like, it's basically this woman who remarries this like crazy man who like kills the whole family. So it's like loosely based off of him, I guess. The movie The Usual Suspects with Kevin Spacey, ew. That's based off of him too. He was like one of the first family murder stories. I'm not proud to say it happened in my town. That's why, because of that story, I do think Westfield is a little bit haunted. Final consensus on the broccoli cheddar mac and cheese: obsessed. Would I get it in the bread bowl? Probably not. The reason why I love getting like soup in bread bowls so much is because I like the sogginess of the soup. But with the mac and cheese, it's not like that soupy, so it's not that liquidy, so it doesn't like, you know, like when you have like tomato soup in the bread bowl, it like creates like a tomato soupy base within the bread. That didn't really happen with the mac and cheese. I'm definitely gonna get tomato soup and eat it with this bread tonight. Now for the best flipping cookie in the entire world. You guys have no idea. Look at it! Oh my god, it looks so good! Buzz, hee hee. I forgot how good Panera's cookies are. Like, their bakery slaps. Slaps! It's hard at the top, but once you bite into it, it's like the perfect gooey filling. Honestly, some closing words of advice. If you are a father who happens to be very religious, and if your kids don't believe in God as much as you do, take a step back, chill a little bit. If you just lost your job, take a step back, chill, tell yourself, how can I solve this without murdering my whole family? That simple. This is literally the 3rd year in a row I'm a B. I mean, I'm not doing anything for Halloween this year, so I'm like, whatever, I'll just dress up for my video. Best meal ever. Let me know if you guys want me to do these kinds of like spooky stories in the future, or just crime, like mystery stories in general, because it is something that I genuinely am really into. I love like true crime mysteries and stuff like that, so it would be fun, you know, to talk about some more in a mukbang. Thanks again for watching, you guys, and happy Halloween! Woo! Hee hee.